Now it is my privilege to bring to the podium a gentleman who has become my most eloquent spokesman for veterans and military personnel from all generations. Tom Brokaw is a longtime anchor of NBC News and author of The Greatest Generation, and most recently, The Time of Our Lives, A Conversation About America. In addition to many awards and accolades, here is one you may not know of. He was elected governor of South Dakota at the young age of 17. That's true. He attended the 1957 American Legion Boys State program in his home state of South Dakota and was elected governor by his fellow delegates. Here now to introduce the Medal of Honor recipients and to share a few personal remarks, please welcome Tom Brokaw, who has graciously volunteered his time to be with all of us this evening. Tom Brokaw.
Thank you all very much. It's a great privilege for me to be here. I feel very much at home. And Sal, I just want to say, because it's your birthday, we're going to get you an extra measure of butterscotch pudding in your MRE tomorrow morning. So, in fact, I am of the generation, the current phrase is it takes a village to raise a child. I'm of the generation in which we would say to one another, it takes the American Legion to raise a child. Because when I was growing up in South Dakota and living in a Corps of Engineers project hard by the Missouri River at Fort Randall Dam, when you wanted to get something done, you turned to the Legion. They sponsored my Boy Scout troop. I played American Legion baseball, and in fact, I was elected governor of South Dakota Boys State in 1957. And I'm happy to report to you that the real governor of the state of South Dakota came and witnessed my inauguration. We became fast friends. He was a very distinguished member of the Medal of Honor Society. That was Joe Foss, the great Marine air ace from World War II. It was, for me, the kind of experience as a young man that was irreplaceable because it gave me a goal and an inspiration about what I wanted to do with my life. And as I watched that film, I was so struck, as I am every time I'm around Medal of Honor recipients or even people who didn't get recognition for heroism but served in combat. They always say the same thing. It's not about me, it's about my buddies who didn't come back. And I never hear anybody, Medal of Honor recipient or just combat veterans, say, I only want to be in a foxhole with somebody from a red state or from a blue state, or I would check to see whether they were a Tea Party member or not. But before I introduce the Medal of Honor recipients tonight, I just want to share with you a lasting impression from the end of this past year that so many of you were witness to. You lost one of your most distinguished Medal of Honor recipients, Danny Inouye, United States Senator. He led a long and distinguished life after unparalleled heroism in the Italian campaign. What many of you may not know is that Danny grew up in Honolulu as a Japanese-American citizen. His family had been there since the late 1800s. And when Pearl Harbor happened, he rushed down to the harbor to treat his fellow Americans with the Boy Scout first aid training that he'd gotten. Then when he heard that his cousins and others on the mainland were being shipped off to internment camps, he volunteered for the 442nd. And as he stood on the dock, his father said to him, "This country has been very good to your family. Now, you may have to die for this country, but if you do, it'll be a great honor for your family." He didn't die, of course. He was gravely wounded in Italy. He was shipped back to the United States and sent to a VA hospital in Upper Michigan. And he found himself in a room with two other combat veterans, one also from the Italian campaign and one from Utah Beach. The young man from the Italian campaign had been gravely shattered along his entire right side. He'd grown up in a small town in Kansas, and he was trying to recover from his wounds. The other young man was from a wealthy and politically connected family in Detroit. He'd been terribly hurt on Utah Beach. He could have gotten out of combat because of his political connections, but chose not to. The three of them would lie awake at night and talk about how they wanted to lead their lives. And they decided that public service would always be the principal component of their lives. It was Danny Inouye, Bob Dole, and the late Phil Hart. One Republican, two Democrats. And it's an astonishing anecdote, but it doesn't end there. Because when Danny was lying in state at the Capitol Rotunda, Bob Dole appeared, got out of his wheelchair, because he didn't want Danny Inouye to ever see him in a wheelchair. And he stood over the casket and he saluted. And to me, as a journalist, as an amateur historian, and as a citizen, that was the emblematic picture of our times. A Republican saluting a Democrat, having shared combat experience and having shared a life in public service, trying to do one thing, which was to advance the interest of this country. There could not have been a better way for Danny Inouye to have gone out.
Folks, I want to thank you all. It's truly a great privilege to be here tonight with so many, and I don't use this phrase lightly, brave women and men who have served our country with such extraordinary valor and distinction. Our veterans are, I think, unique in the world in that every single generation has risen to the occasion. From World War II to Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan, and lots of places I didn't even mention. And in each and every circumstance, the next generation that comes along astounds the one that went before it. You've met danger and glory with equal measure, and you've always not only won, but made our country proud of you. It's a real honor to be here tonight with, I'm told, 25 Medal of Honor recipients. As a matter of fact, it's not an honor, it's literally humbling. We have a lot of obligations as a nation, but we only have one truly sacred obligation. This is not hyperbole. We only have one truly sacred obligation. We have an obligation to the elderly and the young. We have an obligation to educate and protect, but only one truly sacred obligation. And that's to equip those we send to war and care for them and their families when they come home from war. It's the only truly sacred obligation.